I'm so glad you're all here today, and I'm actually really grateful to be here myself. I wasn't feeling well last week, and when I reached out to David to let him know, I was like, this is so ironic that the session that we're doing on authenticity, I have to just like confess, hey, I'm human, I don't feel good, and I can't arrive in the way that I'd really like to. I traveled about a month ago and I've been sick like pretty steadily since then for a month. And it's in the context of a world that's very uncertain, it seems like small potatoes. And at the same time, I also am acutely aware that it's even more important that we be totally honest about what's going on for us in times like this. That the what's below the surface and what's above the surface is part of coming into a new way of showing up for ourselves and in our workplaces as well. So I wanted to do this session about authenticity before I even had run into this deliberate challenge myself of how upfront do I be about what's going on with me and how well I am. And part of um, the power of the concept of authenticity comes from the reality that we don't know what's going on in our world. And we're in workplace environments much of the time, particularly in corporate spaces, but also in nonprofits and in educational contexts, where there's supposed to be an answer. There's supposed to be either a known body of content or a protocol or a strategy. This is the way that we work. And if things aren't working according to that, then there's something wrong. And it's easy for us to be challenged against that ideal, our performance against that ideal, whether it's spoken or not spoken. Those ideals are present. And one of the concepts that we talk about at YOL is the idea of the VUCA world. And I'm going to put my slideshow on for a moment, but then I won't be able to see your lovely faces, which I will miss. But I'll bring you right back as soon as I can. Let me just share my screen with you for a moment, and we'll come to just this couple of images I wanted to share. Okay. There's a concept in well, it's really old philosophy. It was marketed well by the Greeks, but I think it was part of the Egyptians before, the idea of harmony and symmetry in the universe, and the idea that there, as above, so below, and that there is a way of being that reflects the truth of what is. And when we're in alignment with that truth, to me, that's the definition of authenticity. When our inner territory and our outer territory are in symmetry, and therefore the forces at play in our lives can be in harmony with the forces at play in the world, because we've come into that alignment. And when we talk about the world being VUCA, this is an acronym that's come up from systems thinking and complexity theory. The concept is that right now, unlike other times in history where we pretended it was different, we're coming to acknowledge there's a volatility, an uncertainty, a complexity, and an ambiguity in the reality that we encounter day to day. And at YOL, we like to talk about these elements of VUCA having an antidote in the workplace, an antidote that, following the acronym, is actually bringing our vulnerability, bringing our not knowing, our beginner's mind, bringing our compassion, and really bringing our authenticity as ways to address the fire of that ambiguity and the complexity, the uncertainty, and the volatility. That when we actually use these as an antidote for our for the current state around us, we can bring a kind of inner presence to match and mirror the sorry, I've lost my mouse. to match and mirror what's happening outside of us, we mirror that inside, and we create that that as above, so below. We're meeting that volatility outside of us with the skill of a deeper vulnerability. We're meeting that ambiguity with the skill of authenticity and saying, I know that I don't know what is the truth. I don't know the answer. And at the same time, I can find that place inside of myself where I have the practice at being authentic, that I can show up in the moment to be with it as it is, rather than trying to stay in alignment with an ideal of I'm 100% competent 100% of the time because that's what I have to be. And when leaders can model that, then teams can follow that. But if leaders find themselves caught up in the idea of having to project a certain kind of power that is a power that knows, a power that has all of the answers, then nobody's really free. The leaders aren't free to be in the not knowing, and the team isn't free to be honest about their not knowing either. It also expands the space for solution building when people are able to acknowledge that they don't know, that they don't have all of the answers, that we do make mistakes, and that we can respond to those errors as learning opportunities, and to bring compassion to ourselves and to one another in those moments where the reality of the not knowing has resulted in concrete outcomes that may not be what we desire, but that are a part of the process. I wanted to just invite each of you to share a little bit about a time where you felt that you were able to really bring your authenticity to the table. Perhaps, we all wear masks, but those masks are also, beneficial, and they serve us at various points in time to protect us and to keep us safe and secure. But there are moments where there's an inner radiance, that inner territory can shine through. And I'd love to hear from you about moment when you've had that breakthrough moment of, you know what, this is the truth of what's inside of me, and I'm going to share that. And maybe you could share the moment, and if you want to, an outcome that emerged from you coming from that place of authenticity. Adversity intelligence, are you speaking now, or would you like to mute your background noise?
I think that's Jason, and let me see if I can. Jason, are you there?
Michael, were you getting ready to share?
Well, Zia, it's interesting. I mean, wow, what a I just had the word I was going to say. So thank you, first of all. Okay. And I was thinking about an example to give, and I thought, wow, what a daunting question you just posed to us. Like, my body just locked up, right? Which was kind of the God, I'm such at a loss for words here. Flight or fight kind of a reaction to what you're asking here. There's a vulnerability that I think is probably, well, for me, maybe for everybody, is the most difficult thing to kind of get past. But when you do have a breakthrough, it's amazing how you connect with the person next to you or on the other side of the screen in a way that is so dramatically different. And this isn't a monumental breakthrough or anything, but last week, maybe it was a week before, I was holding a weekly session with some of my team members, and frankly, we were all in this moment where nobody had done anything, nobody felt like doing anything, And I just said, you know what? I'm just so glad that you all showed up to this meeting, because I just need to know you're there, right? We don't have to talk about anything. We don't have to accomplish anything. Just know that we all care about each other enough to show up, right? That's it. And it was a very casual conversation for the next half hour. Like I said, not a monumental breakthrough by any means, but we certainly could have forced something to happen and nothing good would have come out of it. But I've seen the back and forth communications, and everyone's just, there's such a level of care and compassion that comes with that, sort of naturally and organically once you allow yourself to do that. So thank you. Thanks for making me say that.
Yeah, there's so much energy that's tied up in the holding, that's tied up in the I need to protect and I need to survive. And in our workspaces, because it's connected to status and belonging and competence, those fight or flight responses come up very, very often. And the consequence to being seen as incompetent in our workspace is the loss of our ability to earn money, the loss of our ability to take care. So it can feel like extremely high stakes, and it's normal that our bodies would snap into that fight, flight, or freeze mode, and to become able to notice that that's happening, to ground ourselves by, feeling the sensation around us, to take a deep breath, to really come back into the present moment. Those are ways of getting back in touch with our inner resources. And then it's from that place that we can make the move to be more authentic and to say, hey, I'm sorry I snapped just then. I've been going through a lot lately. That's just not part of the dominant norm of workplace culture. And when we do that, it opens up a space for everyone to be so much more truthful. It's almost like we're seeking a kind of honesty that we haven't been allowed to bring. And when we do come with that honesty about the truth of our lives, of where we are in the moment, what the emotions that we're feeling, there's an opening up as well as a settling into, I actually do belong with this community. We actually are here for each other, and a trust can grow that actually increases our ability to perform, because we know this team has my back. We have one another's back.
Nice.
Jennifer, are you ready to share?
I am. So a year ago at P&G, once a year we do this big wellness fair, and they always do a 5K around downtown Cincinnati, and everybody enjoys that. And they found out I was a yoga teacher, and I had only been a yoga teacher for about 3 months. And they're like, hey, why don't you teach yoga out on P&G's lawn? And I was a little bit nervous because, I mostly had just been teaching for free for my friends. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So we had 50 people. It was the first time that we were even allowed on the lawns in P&G, because it was always this taboo carpet that nobody was allowed on. We had over 50 people there. I get there and the wireless mic wasn't working. And so I have 50 people spread out on the lawn, right? And I'm looking at the lady who's in charge, and she's looking at me going, I don't know. And somebody came out with a handheld microphone. Now, I don't know if you guys ever done yoga before, the downward dog with a microphone, it doesn't work very well. So I didn't know what else to do. I just shoved it down into my sports bra, and I did yoga with a microphone in front of all my colleagues and people I don't know out on the lawn at P&G with a microphone stuck into my sports bra. And it ended up being amazing anyway. Nobody cared in the end. That it was a little bit awkward, and it got to a point where now they asked me to teach, at least once a month. and it became a kind of a popular thing. But it was one of those things where, you know, I could have gotten angry at the woman who set it up, right? I could have been angry at the AV people. I could have just said, never mind, we can't do it. I did at one point, you know, say, okay, we don't have a microphone. So I was screaming, okay, get in touch with your breath, you know, and I felt like this isn't working either. So just finding a, you know, creative solution and just being like, I don't know, we'll just try this. Ended up like building a lot more confidence in myself that no matter what happens, I can figure it out. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a not as deep example maybe that you were looking for, but it was one of the things that kind of came to my mind.
I think that's a perfect example, Jennifer, because, you know, in the moment you overcame the resistance. Like, I don't know how to do this is the inner dialogue. And okay, I'm going to find a way to make this happen. And what emerged was the opportunity for you to keep practicing as a yoga teacher and to bring the gift that you wanted to bring into your company and actually offer that in an ongoing way. So again,
Right.
that courage to be authentic in the moment of challenge opened up a new solution space, opened up a new set of gifts. I think that's an excellent example.
Thank you.
Well, while the rest of you are thinking, I'll offer one of mine. I was part of a design group, and I found myself often frustrated by the disciplinary structures that the architects and the landscape architects and the designers were holding on to in the space where we were working. And I started to bring up this fire that I was feeling inside of myself. We really need to diversify our perspectives. We need to be thinking about not just the physical structures, but the people that inhabit the physical structures. And I really didn't want to be the one to challenge the ideas. I didn't want to be the one to challenge this group that I felt really delighted to be a part of. But I did. And I spoke up about it because I felt it was like a burning inside of myself that I needed to say, I think we're limited. I think we're not creating the best things that we could be creating because we're too narrow. And by being authentic in that moment and sharing what I knew was my truth, we ended up having an ongoing conversation for the entire cycle of the design work. And when we began a new cycle, we actually created a committee to recruit different kinds of people into the work. And I'm so glad that we did that. And the conversation continues in a different way with a different quality of recruitment, not just for disciplinary perspectives, but also for different cultural backgrounds. We together realized that we needed more diversity in what we were creating. If we were designing for the world, we needed our team to reflect that world. And I'm really grateful that that change came about. But in the moment, I was definitely like the newbie in the group, and my voice was just beginning to be heard, and to take the risk and to say, I think we really need to expand beyond the conversations that we're having felt like a tremendous risk of my status in the group and of my future ability to contribute freely. But it was worth it to be authentic in that moment, to be radically honest about where I was coming from, and I see a benefit for myself and my own sense of courage, and for the group in the long term. Any other examples to share?
Couldn't find an example of a breakthrough experience, but I still strive for incremental transformation. And it's even in this moment, it appears that this well-being series community is a community I want to be a part of. At the same time, I want to validate my, I guess I don't know what I call my right to be here, my privilege of being here. I want to show that I belong, and so I'm constantly looking for ways to say something that is maybe not witty, but at least insightful. And so it's often there's a constant anxiety of how do I show that I belong.
That is so human, Brian. Thank you for sharing that. That's really vulnerable, because it touches a chord that every single one of us humans now in this room, and every single human that has lived on this earth has experienced. And part of our armor, our social armor, is to act as if we don't care whether we belong, but we do. We want to be valued. We want to be recognized. We want to be appreciated and seen and heard for who we are. And being able to go to that place to be honest, that's something that we care about, takes it to a whole other level, particularly in the workspace, because there is a norm in the United States, at least in the corporate workplace, that we're not supposed to bring our full humanity. We're only supposed to bring a narrow bandwidth of what it is to be human. And when we do that, when we take that risk, two things very predictably happen. One is that we give each other permission to show our humanness and their humanness, which can increase trust sometimes. And the other thing that happens is that there's an increased sense of risk, that, how am I going to be perceived and received if I break the rule, if we start to change our organizational culture to be more honest, to take off those masks, to acknowledge some of the archetypes that are driving us, to be seen as the captain of the ship on our team, rather than the gardener who nurtures. Those archetypes are always operating, and sometimes they're in conflict with one another. And if I disclose, I can bark orders like the admiral. That's true. That's a part of who I am. But who I want to be is the gardener who tends and offers just the right amount of water and just the right amount of fertilizer and pulls the weeds in order to clear the way for growth. Then I am taking a risk that I might be called on, hey, you're showing up as the admiral right now, not as the gardener you said you wanted to be. So there's a risk that opens up when we start to work in this authentic space. I would say that taking that risk actually furthers all of our growth in the context of a team that's really working together and open to this kind of thing. If I'm in a team that's not open to it, and I make that kind of disclosure, the risk is even more daring, because it's likely that at some point I will get pushback from people who aren't willing to make that kind of disclosure, who don't want to see the workplace as a terrain for growth. But then again, the benefit from establishing a new kind of norm in that way is that people who really weren't open to that, who weren't ready, and who were resistant to it, can start to feel and experience the benefit of that, even if they're not participating in it actively. They can see that and witness that in the team and begin to open their mind to that kind of growth. And over time, sometimes you see that those become the all-stars, the ones who were most resistant at first. They become the ones who want to share their story about what vulnerability and authenticity and self-compassion has done for them. I want to introduce an idea to the conversation that has to do with, it's two-sided. on the one hand, it has to do with bringing our humanness in to the workplace and understanding that the workplace is a very powerful terrain for cultivating what's inside. That as above, so below maps right onto what is within and what is without. What are we willing to share, and what do we decide really and truly that we want to keep to ourselves? It's an openness, but it's also a healthy boundary. It's the contested terrain, the defended territory. If you think of us like a map, like an island, where we think of our edges, there's the ocean around us where we're intermingling with other people. And you know, boats are coming in and boats are going out, messages are being carried, but we maintain that idea of ourselves as kind of a semi-permeable territory. Where are some of the places that inside yours, and you don't have to share about this, but just reflect on it for a time. Where are some of the places inside of yourself that are the most guarded? Where are some of the places that you want to keep your armor up? Knowing that about yourself can help you understand how you're reacting. It's normal for us as humans to want to protect our status and our autonomy. It's normal for us to want to protect our places of belonging. And it's okay to do that. It's okay to keep those boundaries and keep some of our territory defended. That's part of being able to feel safe and to keep showing up and offering our creative self and our daring self with authenticity. But to know where those places are, that's one of the ways that we can really bring forth our best in the workplace. Is that if I know that I don't want my belonging to be challenged, that my little girl self who looked around and thought, I think I'm different than the people who I'm going to school with here in my first grade classroom. I think I'm different because they all have a lot of money and they have elevators in their houses. And my family is teachers and they value education. So they sent me to a private school where there's a lot of people who are different than me. And I go over for birthday parties and our houses look really different. And I think I'm different. That little girl still lives inside of myself. And when I go to fancy places with fancy people, that little girl is still walking in the room with me. And I know that I'm competent. I know that I belong. And that's true just as much as that little girl is also very real inside of me that wants to be recognized, to be seen and heard and valued. And welcomed as someone who belongs in that community. So if I were to react negatively to someone who said, I didn't belong there because I'm from a different socioeconomic class, or I didn't belong there because my skin is a different color, or I didn't belong there because I'm not as well educated, those kinds of ideas are just as vivid in the way that I'm going to react proactively or negatively. I mean, I can look at my own personal story and say, maybe that's why I went to Stanford and got a PhD. I thought it was because I wanted to do some research and help the community that I was working with. But maybe that I was partly motivated by my little girl who wanted to be respectable in the world and who never wanted to be told you don't belong here or you're not competent enough. So knowing that inner territory is very important when it comes to the practice of authenticity and really showing up in the ways that we want to model for one another in our teams, in our workplaces. It's those places where our status and our belonging and our autonomy is threatened are the places where we are most likely to react, most likely to go into the fight or flight mode. And so being aware of the defended territory inside of ourself is very, very important when we want to relate with authenticity. When we want to bring our full self, we have to really know our full self. Many of the communities that I'm a part of these days have been speaking about the big emotions. We're experiencing sadness. We're experiencing loss on a collective scale right now because of the ways that the world is changing. We're experiencing an imminence of death and of grief. They're big emotions, and people are feeling anger inside, and expressing that to their partners, and expressing that by shutting down and going to self-abusive behaviors and addiction. That's normal human behavior in a difficult time, but the emotions have gotten really big. If we're not ready to go into those emotions, if we're not willing to acknowledge the shadow side of what is within us, it's all part of our human experience. It's all part of who we are. But if we're not willing to acknowledge those big emotions, then we can't actually go down into the deeper reality of what has created those patterns, those ways of responding, those habitual reactions and the knee-jerk responses. If we can't get through the layer of automaticity and really go to the what is here in the present moment, then the cause of those bigger emotions can never really be addressed. We're not able to work at that deeper level. If you think of an iceberg, they're the big emotions that we see on top. We see our reactivity, we see our anger, but deep below that, there are so many stories, there are so many layers, there are so many archetypes. Getting to work in that territory with ourselves is really what creates the growth that allows us to show up in different ways above the surface, in the ways that we relate to our team members, in the ways that we relate to our family members and to our professional colleagues. Are you folks kind of hearing what I'm saying? I'm curious what sense you're making out of these words and these stories. Thank you, Nina. I'd love to hear from you if you're making any connections to your own experiences.
Hi, this is Erica Hospice. I arrived late and I'm leaving early, but I'm glad that I at least got this slide. It's fantastic. And I think I appreciate what you're saying. It's really resonating with me. I would be curious, and maybe you already said this and I didn't hear, but how would you coach and guide people to be vulnerable with one another in a workplace, right? Because that's not really whether you're dealing in big tech companies or in pharma, whatever organization one could be in. I would be curious on how you might teach HR leaders or teach them how they can show up in that vulnerable, authentic way so that they can start creating that safety for the employees.
That is literally what we do at YOL, among other things, teaching people over time to cultivate a somatic state of presence so that they can do this work in real time. That's what we do at YOL.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'll do more research on you guys and check you out. So thanks.
Great. To answer your question in brief, I would say, think of the spectrum. There's we know very well the extreme of the kind of shut down and, you know, only work, only business is what gets done here extreme. And then we know much less well from our experiences the other extreme, where everyone is sharing so often that we really don't get work done because we're having like one check-in in the morning and then our stand-up meeting, and then we're like processing our emotions and like filling out our form of feedback. And like, most of us haven't lived in that workplace, although those workplaces do exist in certain contexts, like the holocratic workplace can often feel that way, where everything is being workshopped constantly. So if you look across that spectrum, what is right for your organization, given the values that you hold as part of your organizational culture? Where do you want to be on that spectrum? How much energy are you collectively willing to stand for putting into cultivating a workplace that has that authenticity and validity, is willing to give validity to the ideas of compassion, vulnerability, not knowing, and authenticity? So you have to kind of do an assessment before you start to dive in and say, hey, we're gonna create this, because the workplace culture has to be in alignment with those deeper values, otherwise it's not going to stick. So do that assessment first and get kind of like an organizational feel for what's going to be right for your company and right for your team. And then you want to get consent. There are people who are not going to like this, but who will agree to go on the journey. And so pushing people into this kind of work without their consent is unlikely to be successful. So whether it's having experiences like the ones that we do at YOL, where we take people into environments that are unfamiliar to them, engage them in hands-on service, mindful practice, offer them somatic strategies to realize, hey, I can do this. There's a whole set of resources and tools that I can use to work with what is inside myself and what is in the challenges we face together as a professional team, and to show up better and better. Like, to actually have those experiences and know that it's possible, that's a good time to get consent from your team before embarking on the year-long journey or the 6-month journey or even the 3-week journey of trying some simple practices and new routines that will begin to invite the new kind of VUCA as an antidote to the extreme external VUCA that we're engaging in our day-to-day. Does that answer some of your question as far as places to begin, Erica?
That's awesome. I love it. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? We're coming to the end of our time, and any other responses or things coming to mind?
I was going to offer something insightful to show that I belong here. Erica, the way I'm interpreting what Zanette is saying is that vulnerability plus unknowing plus compassion plus authenticity, that in a nutshell is what psychological safety is all about. And that's foundational to any high functioning team, at least in my experience. And when I get asked by team leaders how to cultivate psychological safety, my quick answer is, well, be vulnerable, because you have more impact than any other person on the team to create an atmosphere that where being vulnerable is not just okay, but it's a good thing. But to get more specific, I'll say share a time when you failed, but don't frame it as, oh, I failed, so I'm a failure. Frame it as, I failed and this is what I learned from it. I'm done.
Absolutely. We have this idea that we learn by getting information from PowerPoints, or we learn by having new things rolled out and, you know, adopting new procedures, but really we learn by watching. That's what humans at the deepest level of our neurobiology are programmed to do. You see little 2-year-olds and they're doing what their parents do or saying what their parents say. And that at the deepest level of our organism, we learn by watching and we learn by doing with our hands. And when leaders take the risk to show it's okay to show up in these ways, that's when we become granted permission to start to explore, to start to know, hey, it's okay to do these things. And any team or organization that genuinely wants to move toward this way of operating, I, as a consultant and coach, will work with the core of the team first before trying to expand it to the team, because they have to know in an experiential way what this feels like before asking someone else to take a risk and feel the bottom drop out and sense disequilibrium in all of their relationships for the next month because you shared something vulnerable like I shared with you about my inner child. It changes everything. And the team has to feel that. The leadership team has to feel that before expanding outward within the context of the organization, and to know just what it takes to say yes to what they're asking from their people. So transformation, organizational transformation often looks like strategy, integrated change management on the outside, but it is an inside job. If we really want it to last and to stick and to be responsive in an ongoing way, not just adopting the new program, it is inside work. And I think that's the message I'd like to leave you with today, is that we can't change our organizations without changing ourselves, because how we show up is the heart of the organization. We are the organization. It's a living, dynamic matrix of interaction and place and virtual space. And it lives because we live in it. And giving more attention to who we are and how we show up in those moments of choice, those moments of challenge, and those moments of crisis is some of the best work that we can do to sustain the ongoing change that we want to see in our organizations. It's not just about higher performances and better results. It's we can gain those improved outcomes by creating new ways of showing up for ourselves that allow us to sustain that, not just in the moment, but to continue responding and growing in an ongoing way. It's iterativity by design, because we're becoming the flexible container. We're becoming the compassionate adjuster. We're learning about the process of shifting between the archetypes that are present within us and moving from the old that is now and into the new that is also now. This idea of organizational change as an inside job that begins with authenticity, that's the idea I hope you'll carry forward from this session. So thank you all.
Thank you.
I look forward to hearing how you...
Bless you, Jennifer.
Oh, you're muted, Jennifer. Did you want to say something? Thank you, Nina.
No, I just sneezed. Somebody said bless you, so thank you. They're cutting grass all around me. I'm very allergic. Thank you.
I know that we'll be gathering again soon, so I look forward to hearing how you take this seed and find it sprouting in your weeks to come.
Yeah, I love the reframe of VUCA. We use VUCA all the time at P&G. It's a military. Bob McDonald used to be our CEO, and he came from the military, which was used this The fire VUCA was always used. I love, love, love the shadow and the light, the balance of this. Because this is what I'm always trying to bring, but at a big company that is very male dominated, that's very like machine oriented, you know, I want to bring the feminine to the masculine. This is a beautiful way to reframe VUCA. So thank you.
Hey Z, this is Michael. I just wanted to share something. My brother-in-law recently came out of the hospital. He tested positive and spent a week in the hospital. And thank God he's getting back to normal. But he texted me the other day and he said, "I'm having a surreal moment. I'm listening to this 21 Pilots song." I thought, wow, okay. So the thing that struck me in our conversation today is, because I work with a lot, talking about male-dominated places, I work with a lot of male operational leaders, very seasoned guys. A few of them are in touch with themselves. Many of them are not. And what I always remember from that song is, my name is Blurry Face and I care what you think, right? And that's what they walk around with, right? Like they have a hard time till you break through that shell. So I've taken some things away from the conversation today. Thank you. I love this VUCA setup. I'm going to use that. Hopefully you don't have that copywritten because it's going to be out there in other places. So thanks a lot for sharing.
Just give credit to YOL, please. Thank you.
You bet.
I want to say to Brian, thank you for your vulnerability about sharing that desire to belong. And we all feel that. And I think that when we find a way to reward that kind of openness, that's when all of us get excited to bring what's really inside. I want to talk about my culture and my family, and it's okay for me to belong, bringing everything that I have. And that's, to me, that's the workplace of the future, is that whatever inspires us, whatever thrills us is welcome, because if it thrilled us, it's going to spark things for other people. And we've been hiding those parts of ourselves. And I'm excited for the time when we can really show up more and more with all those parts of ourselves and create norms that actually reward us for sharing those things that are at the deeper layers, because I know that it contributes to trust and performance and empathy and the outcomes that we have committed to as a team that's working together toward a goal. So I'm excited that you're excited and finding connection with these ideas. So I hope that it will continue to grow and the positive fire will spread. Thanks for bringing us together today, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Z, and thank you to everybody. And tomorrow we've got another cool session with Skylar Skikos, who is a partner of YOL, who runs a really cool real estate development company called Local Framework. And one of their properties is the Hotel Olima, where we were going to do our mindful leadership cohort beginning in June. It's now been postponed, but they have a really interesting approach to developing venues and operating venues in connection with local communities. And separate to that, he has another project going on looking at regenerative communities. And he's partnered with a really awesome guy. Some of you may know Chip Conley, who used to be, I mentioned earlier, beginning, he used to be head of hospitality at Airbnb. He ran a very big hotel chain, Joie de Vivre, and he now runs the Modern Elder Academy in Baja. And he's going to be joining us to talk about peak leadership in a week or two. We're just trying to nail down a date right now. So a little bit of a connection there, but thank you guys and look forward to seeing you hopefully tomorrow.